Breaking Brain, Bookish Teleportation. Like you see, I'm still a bookish girl. Today, Brené Brown and Dare to Lead. And if you think about your favorite leader, who is it? Do you know what core value is the most important for you, like the first? Or if you need to share with someone, for example, with us, your two, the most important core values for you are, please tell us, because values are our fundamental. It's something what we try to share with another people every day. And in this case, only two, maybe it's just enough to do something like that more efficiency. And of course, if you want to wait for the end this episode, I share my value with you. Thank you and stay with us, with me and Brené Brown. Dare to Lead. Brave Work, Tough Conversation, Whole Hearts by Brené Brown. Dare to Lead is a life story about modern workplace culture that offers vulnerability, trust, values, and resilience as the most crucial leadership qualities. Dare to Lead is about being brave enough to embrace leadership that exposes fear and uncertainty. Easier said than done. But maybe do you want to try? Leadership is not about titles or the corner office. It's about the willingness to step up, put yourself out there, and lean into courage. The world is desperate for braver leaders. It's time for all of us to step up. Brené Brown is a research professor at the University of Houston, specializing in courage and empathy research. Your first step? Probably, if you will read this book. In Dare to Lead, Brené Brown has created a handbook for anyone who wants to learn how to be an authentic, empathetic, and courageous leader. A leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding potential in people and processes, having the courage to develop the potential, conversely learning to live with more courage and vulnerability can help you live up to your true potential and take you down paths you never could have imagined otherwise. It's learning and practice that requires brave work, tough conversation, and showing up with our whole hearts. I'm the first one to say that this all sounds a bit soft and fluffy, but it's actually quite confronting and difficult to do. Are you ready for that? The term rambling with vulnerability refers to creating an atmosphere of trust when people feel like they can have an open and honest conversation. Gather your team or class and ramble by making it acceptable for people to show their weaknesses or say the wrong thing. How do you feel when you make a mistake at work? For many of us, failure is something that we avoid at all costs because we think it paints us as incompetent. So, when we do something wrong at work, we tend to make a move towards self-protection. Far from being weak, vulnerability is a vital asset for growth. Feeling vulnerable is a common human emotion felt during times of uncertainty as well as when we open ourselves up to others, but it's not anything to be ashamed of. Rather than thinking of vulnerability as a weakness and allowing the feelings of self-protection to take over, the key is to think of vulnerability as being an asset. Being vulnerable means being honest about what you are going through in work and life and communicating that to your team. Now, it doesn't mean going into details about every aspect of your life with your team members. Vulnerability is not knowing victory or defeat. It's understanding the necessity of both. It's engaging. It's being all in. Brené Brown. Being vulnerable is paramount to our creativity, our health, our relationship, and our growth. Unfortunately, due to our Western culture, believing that being vulnerable means being weak, most of us struggle to embrace what we perceive as failure, learn from it, and use it as a stepping stone to success. Our ego will indeed do anything it can be minimize the inner discomfort that comes with rambling with vulnerability. What will people think? Oh my god! If you build a culture where vulnerability is seen as a weakness, don't ask people to innovate, because innovation by its nature requires failure to learn and move forward. Courage is continuous. To scale direct leadership and build courage in teams and organizations, you have to cultivate a culture in which brave work, tough conversation, and whole hearts are the expectation, and armor is not necessary or rewarded. Without clear values to start from, there is no thoughtfulness. Not having clearly defined values can lead to paralysis and impulsive decision making. A brave leader is never silent about hard things. A value is a way of believing that we hold as important. It reminds us why we went into a tough situation in the first place. Values are the human ideals we consider as most important in our lives. Some examples of values are courage, freedom, justice, kindness, discipline, family, and honesty. People who know what their values are have an easier time dealing with adversity. They can let their values guide them. There's something to hold on to in dark and difficult times. They allow you to be resilient and do what's necessary. Our values determine our decisions about what is most valuable in our lives. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort, is choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them. Brené Brown. Make a list of your core values and then highlight the two that are the most important to you. 2 is the magic number due to Brené discovering that leaders with 10 or more values were less able to demonstrate vulnerability and courage due to feeling overwhelmed on what action to take, none of the core values being the driving force of their behavior and just a bunch of words written down that made them feel good. With clear values to follow, it is easier to navigate tricky situations. They offer a clearer route for you to take. It can take some time to figure out your core values, but once you have defined them, you will find it's easier to find your way in the dark. Speaking of actions, once you've identified your core values, you need to find ways to translate them into behaviors. You need to choose specific practices, then embody the values you set and help you show up for your team members is the best way. Use your core values to onboard people. In order to rumble, we have to brave trust. It's not an option, and our willingness to rumble depends on it. Without trust, it's impossible for vulnerability to exist. Your team needs to trust you and know that you have their back. If they going to perform to best of their abilities, you need to make them feel comfortable and heard. Trust is the glue that holds teams and organizations together. Many successful organizations regard it as a must-have rather than a nice-to-have. People who are trustworthy respect boundaries, are reliable, and are accountable for their actions. They do not share information that is not theirs to share, and they choose to do the right thing. Perhaps the biggest gap in failed leadership is trust. Trust is a fundamental and multifaceted highlight to our performance relationship. First, though, we need to ask ourselves, what does the idea of trust mean? The author's researchers team has pinpointed 7 diverse attitudes that encourage confidence expressed as braving. We can use braving in a useful way to record strengths and areas for improvement in working relationship with subordinates. We see trust being built all the time when individuals from different functions come together and rely on the knowledge and support of conflicted perspectives. According to Brené Brown, the top trust building behavior is asking for help. Trustworthy people avoid judging others and are generous when interpreting the actions of others. Trust is built in small moments, not blanket statements or grand actions. Being a trusted leader means regularly checking your actions and asking yourself if they meet the right standards. To create trust in all your relationships, remember the acronym BRAVING. B for boundaries. Clarifying and respecting each other's limits is crucial to a collaborative relation. What does it mean? B. Boundaries. Respect other people's boundaries, and if unsure of those boundaries, ask the person if it's okay. The other person needs to feel comfortable with you enough to say no if it's not okay. R. R for reliability. If we can't rely on another to keep our word, what good is it? Do you do what you say you will? Are you aware of your abilities and limitations? Leaders should not overpromise nor underdeliver on the commitments they've made. A for accountability. Making mistakes is normal. Own your mistakes, say sorry, and make amends wherever possible. V for vault closing. Trust is a safeguard for information. If you don't break my confidentiality, I won't break yours. You are a vault of information that people have shared with you, but it's vital you don't share information given to you in confidence. I for integrity. Whatever your core two values are, never compromise them. I practice what you preach. Choose courage over comfort and do what's right over what's easy, immoral, fun, or improper. And for non judgment. When you replace judgment with curiosity, you turn isolation into connection. People need to be able to tell you the truth or ask for help without you judging them. G for generosity. Leave lots of room in your interpretation and expectation. This way, others will always turn to you. Always be generous with your words, actions, and intentions towards others. Look for the best in people, not the worst. I know sometimes it's so hard, but what do you want? The future or nothing? Dealing with the ego. Stifling emotions and vulnerability doesn't foster a healthy work environment because it encourages the ego to step in. When we are operating in defensive environments, there's a huge temptation to strive to protect our egos. How often have you avoided trying something because you are afraid that you will make a fool of yourself, not be good enough, or not live up to your expectations? Brown argues that our egos often influence us and make us nervous and anxious about our performance. Our search for perfection often prevents us from trying because we are too scared of failing or making mistakes. Leaders should foster a work culture where employees aren't afraid to try and fail. There are three ways to do this. The first is to avoid rewarding any kind of defensive behavior. From a young age, we are often praised for not making mistakes, and we are taught to avoid failure at all costs. We often see people getting rewarded for so called perfection, but this isn't healthy because no one learns from doing well all the time. What's more, we often jump towards criticism without offering solutions or ideas. It's crucial to view criticism and solutions as acts that happen simultaneously. Secondly, when people are acting defensively, it's essential to call them out of this behavior. Having open communication is one of the most imperative things for being a good leader, and we must be brave enough to stand up to defensive actions. Making suggestions for improvements and providing honest feedback is part and parcel of being a good leader. Finally, when dealing with ego, remember to recognize team members and employees who are making improvements. When other employees exhibit brave and vulnerable behavior, it should be pointed out as an excellent example to follow. There's no shame in shame. Shame is a genuine and compelling human emotion. Shame often comes with feelings of anxiety, guilt, and worthlessness. When we feel like we haven't achieved our goals or lived up to expectation, we often look at our self-worth and feel that we are not good enough. Great leaders are not perfect since you have to be vulnerable to be courageous, something that perfectionists fear the most. It is possible to have a healthy drive for success without being a perfectionist, though you just have to take a chance and jump into life. Right from childhood, we seek to shield ourselves from vulnerable feelings like disappointment, hurt, and diminishment. By building a wall out of our behaviors, emotions, and thoughts, we protect ourselves from the big imperfect world. But it's impossible. To live and lead with courage, we must let ourselves be vulnerable as we already know. It means letting down our walls and recognizing protective thoughts and behaviors for the defense mechanisms they are. One of the most pervasive types of self protection is perfectionism. 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 Probably it's not perfect, but I try. To become daring leaders, we must rid ourselves of perfectionism. If you are a perfectionist, you are not courageous. Perhaps the most damaging myth of all is that perfectionism is about self improvement and striving for excellence. But in fact, perfectionism is really about attempting to win approval. Most perfectionists were born in environments that prize their exceptional performance, for example, in sports or school. As a result, perfectionists develop a damaging belief system that follows them into their adult lives, anchoring their whole sense of self in accomplishments and brilliant execution. Perfectionism is an unattainable goal. It's more about perception than internal motivational, and there is no way to control perception, no matter how much time and energy is spent trying. Actually, it is addictive because when we invariably do experience shame, judgment, and blame, we often believe it's because we weren't perfect enough. Rather than questioning the faulty logic of perfectionism, we become even more entrenched in our quest to look and do everything just right. Perfectionism is the belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. Perfectionism is like a parasite that lingers in the back of your mind. Brené Brown, I hope you enjoy this time and you want to know more. Thank you so much. Take care and stay safe. My core values. If I need to say only about two, the most important, I think it's freedom and I think it's love, but with responsibility. Both. What does mean with responsibility? Freedom for me, it's respect for freedom to another people, and love for me, it's sharing love. And remember, hate, it's never ever a good solution. And in this case, try to love. Love yourself, love others, and remember, your freedom is freedom to everybody, not only for you. Take care.